around priority areas such as electrifying the Caribbean, electrifying the transport sector, decarbonizing difficult to electrify segments of the transport sector, and integrating electric vehicles into power distribution networks, among other topics. CSEF 8 is being brought to you by the CARICOM Secretariat and the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, with support from the Caribbean Development Bank, Jamaica Electric Vehicle Association, the Inter-American Development Bank, and other partners. Let us take a moment to recognize them all and show them our appreciation. Thank you. Tonight, the task of delivering the official welcome is that of Mr. Andrew Jackson, President of the Jamaica Electric Vehicles Association. Please help me welcome Mr. Jackson to the lectern.
Madam Chair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Jamaica Electric Vehicle Association, I would like to welcome you to this 8th Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know that one single 500-watt solar panel can produce as much energy as a barrel of oil over a period of 1 year? Just one panel, okay? Without any pollution whatsoever, certainly during the operational phase. For over 100 years, we have been converting fossil fuel to electricity, to light, transportation. Now the technology allows us to convert light from the sun to electricity, okay? Converting photons into electrons, okay? A country like Jamaica and the rest of the Caribbean that depends heavily on imported oil must be excited by this technology. We have an abundance of sunshine, and I'm told that Jamaica, for example, uses approximately 10 million barrels of oil per year, which costs about 30% of our budget. Okay, half of this, goes to the mobility sector, the cars, the buses, the trucks, and so on. Okay, but somehow, some 2 years ago, the government announced a policy on electric vehicles, which was intended to accelerate and to, increase the usage of electric vehicles in Jamaica. 2 years later, the adoption of electric vehicles in Jamaica is at best disappointing. The number of electric vehicles we see on our roads today, again, I'm advised, is probably less than 500 of a fleet of cars being added per year of about 50,000. Today, we have less than 500 electric cars on our roads. We need to find a way to accelerate that adoption. And this is what the Jamaica Electric Vehicle Association is all about, increasing the rate of adoption of electric vehicles. The advancement in solar and electric vehicle technologies is a godsend for Jamaica. I grew up in the 70s when we have seen us move from one oil crisis to the next, right? Remember what I said, one single solar panel, 500 watts, can produce as much energy as 1 barrel of oil per year. And this solar panel will keep producing and producing, possibly for the next 20 years. it is a godsend for Jamaica. And, you know, we need to find a way to make this work for us. Welcome to this forum, welcome to this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. We must find a way to make it work for Jamaica and the Caribbean. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. And this forum is about finding a way for Jamaica and the Caribbean. So what a wonderful note to end on. Our next speaker is Dr. Stacy Richards Kennedy. Dr. Richards Kennedy is the regional manager for the Caribbean at the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, also known as CAF. In November 2022, CAF officially launched its regional management office for the Caribbean, located in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and it was headed by none other than Dr. Richards Kennedy. CAF has a US $30 billion portfolio of projects across Latin America and the Caribbean, and Dr. Richards Kennedy is leading CAF's effort to provide increased development financing to governments and private sector clients across the region. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Richards to the lectern to deliver her remarks.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand on the protocol that has already been established. Good evening. And let me thank the organizers for their very kind invitation that was extended to CAF, Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, to be a part of this very important event. It is truly an honor to address the participants on the occasion of this 8th Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum. We're very pleased to be a sponsor and also to be deepening our partnership with the CARICOM Secretariat, my brother Joseph, and with specialized regional institutions like the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Our Caribbean needs tangible progress on these issues: climate change, sustainable energy, and transport. Just last week, we were at another energy summit in Barbados, and I heard the president of the Caribbean Development Bank say that without sustainable energy, there can be no sustainable development. And without climate action, there can be no sustainable development. And so CAF, as an institution, has at our DNA, at our very core, a commitment to regional integration and sustainable development. And so we're here because this issue is not just important to us, but it's central to our mandate. We have set as a region very ambitious targets, not to capture headlines, but to underscore the need for urgent action. And I recall what the coastline of Hellshire Beach right here in Jamaica looked like 20 years ago, when we had the expanse of soft, white sand along the shore where families could walk and talk and relax, and the children can play together and sunbathe or just hang out. Now, when I take my children to Hellshire Beach, it really pains me to see what has been the effect of climate change. And I try to explain this to them, but it's a story about the negative effects of the harm and the damage that have been done to the climate. Coastal erosion, sea level rise, the impacts to the many families that depend on the sea for their very livelihood and well-being. So for all of us living in the Caribbean, whether we were born here or not, taking bold steps to support climate action and the transition to renewable energy, This is something that's very personal and should be very personal to all of us. CAF congratulates the organizers on creating this dedicated space to exchange ideas on these issues in a very synergistic way. It is an integrated issue and challenge, which will therefore require multifaceted and multidimensional solutions. As I mentioned, in the weeks prior to this event, CAF was pleased to play an instrumental role in supporting the climate financing conference organized by the government of the Bahamas, the OAS Interministerial on Sustainable Development, the Caribbean Investment Forum, and just last week, the Caribbean Energies and Investment Summit in Barbados. We will also have a pavilion at COP28 dedicated to providing a platform for showcasing the efforts of Latin America and the Caribbean as a region of solutions. Certainly there are challenges, but CAF is known as a bank that is focused on results and delivery. We believe in the power of partnerships and in joining forces with other multilaterals like the CDB, like the IDB, like the World Bank Group, and others represented here today to channel increased financing to the Caribbean and to bring to fruition the development solutions identified by each country. It is imperative that the world reduces greenhouse gas emissions contributing to global warming, and the Caribbean is capable and committed to setting an example of what is possible when technology, political will, the private sector action, and citizens' involvement are harnessed to a common end. That is to save the environment without compromising development progress. Latin America and the Caribbean are regions that have embraced these ambitious goals in the fight against climate, and with few exceptions, nearly all of our countries have signaled their intent to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, some with more ambitious targets and timeframes. And so, on the demand side, the transportation sector stands out, consuming 38% of the region's primary energy supply, particularly gasoline, diesel, and ethanol. And this requires deeper public policy actions and legislative measures to promote the electrification of transport as a key sector that requires the most effort to achieve emission reduction goals. The transition to electromobility requires renewed electricity supply, renewable electricity supply to support the increased demand. And therefore, this requires increased investments, not only in clean generation sources, but also in transmission and distribution networks, especially in the development of charging infrastructure, EV charging stations, and batteries. To meet the demand of the transportation sector, eventually other sectors like industry and residential electric generation must decarbonize before these other sectors, enabling them to receive zero emissions energy by 2030. And in order to achieve these targets, efforts and investments should focus on increasing generation capacity from unconventional renewable sources, replacing like wind, solar, and even hydropower, as well as natural gas projects that can replace coal and oil in industry and transportation cost effectively in the short and medium term. Given CAF's commitment to serve as the Green Bank and to promote inclusive and sustainable growth across Latin America and the Caribbean, we are increasing our support to energy and the energy sector, becoming a strategic partner in the region's energy transition by supporting member countries in transitioning from an energy economy that is based on fossil fuels to one that is based on low greenhouse gas emission energy sources. And we recognize that in many instances, this may mean a dual track approach. As we heard today during the very fruitful discussions, the adoption of electric mobility will enable countries to lay the foundation for decarbonizing the transportation sector, improving air quality, and thereby reducing public health and other issues associated with air pollution, and decreasing the dependence on fossil fuels, promoting Electrification projects in the transportation sector is an important part of CAF's efforts to support the energy transition. And in this regard, we will participate alongside the Green Climate Fund in an electric mobility and low carbon transportation program called eMotion, which involves multiple countries across Latin America and seeks to accelerate the deployment of electric vehicles in the wider region. Supporting the decarbonization of the transportation sector is just one of our strategic goals, and we're therefore extremely pleased to partner with CARICOM Secretariat, with SICRI, and with other multilateral institutions to support fair, equitable, and inclusive energy transition, and to support our governments across the region in making this transition a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Richards. And we thank all the development partners that are coming together to make the transition fair for all, because that is one of the big concerns with the whole energy movement, that some may get left behind. The Inter-American Development Bank is another one of our strategic development partners making CSEF 8 happen. Representing the bank tonight is Mr. Anton Edmonds, General Manager of the Country Department Caribbean Group and Country Representative in Jamaica. Mr. Edmond has over 25 years of experience in management and leadership roles in regional, public, and private sectors and development organizations. Prior to joining the IDB, he was ambassador of St. Lucia to the United States and permanent representative to the Organization of American States. He was also that country's non-resident High Commissioner to Canada and non-resident ambassador to Mexico. Mr. Edmonds, I invite you to deliver your remarks on behalf of the IDB.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable ministers in attendance, ASG Cox, good to see you. Dr. Fletcher, always good to see you. Mr. Minister from St. Lucia, I think because of you, well, not because of you, I'm in this job now versus my prior one, but that's between us. A special acknowledgement. I mean, I told my development bank partners here, my colleagues, Stacy and Therese. And to you, the audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. I was reminded last evening that it was 7 years that I last attended a CSEF conference. It's a long time. It's a lifetime in many respects. Maybe testimony to the continued focus on sustainable energy is perhaps the presence of old friends in the audience, but some may view this as an indication of how far we still need to go. Maybe a little bit of an indictment on how slow it's taken us to get to this point. While I understand that this CSEF forum is supposed to prioritize sustainable energy's pivotal role in powering transportation, I must remind us all that notwithstanding the fact that transportation accounts for more than 1/4 of global greenhouse gases, without the deployment of broad sustainable energy solutions, the foundation for conversations on issues like this will continue to be weak. Let us not let this specific topic distract us from legislation still not passed in some foundational sustainable energy areas. Let us not let this specific subject distract us from the fact that the broader enabling environment is still not that enabling, and that there are special interests within both the public and private sector space that will continue to be oftentimes an impediment to progress. The issue of sustainable transportation does not exist in a vacuum. It exists as a logical follow-up from basic sustainable development goals that we have long set for ourselves. we have to revisit those goals and address them even as we look ahead. For us at the IDB, we're committed to working closely with governments, regional organizations, and other stakeholders to advance a just energy transition by mobilizing technical resources, knowledge sharing, and financing. Through technical assistance, we are contributing to energy planning, the development of enabling regulatory environments and policies for clean energy, roadmaps for decarbonization in the power sector and beyond, including in e-mobility, and in hard-to-abate sectors such as long-haul transportation, shipping, and aviation. Earlier this year, we signed an MOU with the Caribbean Shipping Association, and we are supporting them with knowledge sharing, awareness raising, and targeted studies related to the decarbonization pathway of this particular industry. We as an institution provide long-term financing for investments in resilient, clean energy infrastructure through bank capital and, when possible, blended with concessional financing from various sources. We endeavor, and I'm not necessarily paid to say this, but it is a fact that we endeavor to bring a whole-of-bank approach to the engagement. We have IDB Lab, which is our innovation center, an incubator of sorts. We have the sovereign side of the IDB, which I technically represent here today. But we also have IDB Invest, which is the private sector arm, the entity that is supposed to look for opportunities to partner with those looking to deploy solutions in this space. One of the things that I would suggest that we continue to do is to look at the issue of regional approaches. We have to do so to address the issue of scale. As we all know, small economies that are not of scale are at times not able to enjoy cost-effective solutions and have limited bargaining positions with technology providers. I dare say that with well-coordinated actions, we can explore undertaking aggregated procurement where possible, and regional common actions such as standardization of equipment, regulation, and tendering announcements would be a powerful signal to the market and enhance traction in this region. There's a role here for all of us to work together, including the aforementioned development partners. With badly coordinated actions, however, we risk denying our people the opportunity to advance. We stunt their development as well as our own. I look outside today, 7 years later from the last CSEF. Urban areas have grown, sprawl has expanded, and there are more cars on the road than ever, and our windows are up. That's the scarier part. Our windows are up. Let us use these discussions at this event to be a renewed call for action to harness our collective knowledge and innovation to accelerate a just and resilient energy transformation in the Caribbean, including for the transportation sector. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds, for your remarks, and to the IDB for supporting this initiative. We are also pleased to have the Caribbean Development Bank as one of the hosts of CSEF 8. Representing the CDB this evening is its Director of Projects, Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones. Mrs. Jones joined the CDB in July 2023 and is responsible for managing and leading operations and project development across the Caribbean. A trained economist, Mrs. Turner-Jones has over 30 years' experience in macroeconomics and economic development, with special expertise on the Caribbean and Latin America. She served the International Monetary Fund in senior posts for over 20 years, both at a staff and board level. Between 2013 and 2022, she worked at the Inter-American Development Bank, where she served as General Manager of the Caribbean Group. A member of the International Women's Forum, Mrs. Turner-Jones is passionate about financial inclusion, gender equity, children, vulnerable communities, and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mrs. Turner-Jones to the lectern.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening. This is a long set of remarks, and a lot has happened already, and a lot has been said. I want to congratulate my co-partners in this event, CSEF 8, and it brings me really great pleasure to be here among you all tonight to bring some very brief remarks on behalf of the Caribbean Development Bank, of which I'm very proud to be a part of since July of this year. Listening to Anton and Stacy share their institution's vision of decarbonization and what's happening in our region, I just want to pick up on one point, which is how slow it is that we're moving. And think of it in terms of the 55% target by 2030. We are now in 2023, and we're only at 12%. So that's kind of like the big message for me tonight, is that we're moving too slowly and there's a lot to do. Not to mention, and also picking up on the points I've already raised, how crucial it is for this region to have access to less expensive electricity, because it's a feature in every single part of our daily lives. It affects the extent to which the region is competitive or not, and it's really holding us back. So sluggishness, too slow, we need to move faster, and we need to reduce the cost of energy. Those are my two big messages. So at the CDB, what we're doing to help the region address both these issues is to think about how do we accelerate, how do we get in the mindset of every single policymaker and every single consumer in this region that we're too slow. We want it to happen fast. We want to be driving those electric vehicles, but we want to have a stable, we want to not have, what did I hear today? We don't want to have, what's it called? Range anxiety, right? We want to make sure that the charging stations are there where our vehicles will be, so that when we're driving our electric vehicles, that's not an issue. But I think more importantly, we need to overcome lots of barriers, including the fact that there is regulatory arbitrage happening in this region, among ourselves. We can't figure out how to work together to put together a common set of regulations that will really drive this sector. And if we look around the world, we know that there are regions like Europe that have already decided that ICE engines are going to be phased out by, I think it's 2040 in Europe. We need those same kinds of messages to come from our policymakers in this region, so that investors, if they want to come here, know that the playing field is level. They know what the rules are, they know what the regulations are, they know that if they want to sell resources back to the grid, at what price, it makes sense. I really liked your remarks, Andrew, about, and I'm so happy to hear that the EV Association in Jamaica is making such strides. I've been associated with this work for a long time, and it really makes me happy to see that there is progress. There is a lot more progress that needs to happen. I'm now living in Barbados, where the access to charging stations is probably the highest penetration in the region. And the whole idea behind an electric vehicle is one that is becoming more normalized. But I think importantly, given, especially what Stacy mentioned about climate change and the fact that our region is one of the regions that's mostly negatively affected by what's happening with the climate, we really need to get ahead of the curve in terms of not just advocating for these changes on the ground with our policymakers and with the private sector, but to help make it happen. At CDB, we want it to happen in a way, though, that is, Stacy just mentioned this too, that it's a just transition and that no one gets left behind. It isn't that only certain parts of the population have access to electric vehicles or solar panels or this new way of living with electrification and decarbonization, but we want to make sure that all parts of our society, no one's left behind in doing this. And so we're at the forefront of that. In terms of flagship projects, I want to mention just a couple. Haiti is not really mentioned much around the region because of all of the crisis, and we think that's nothing happening there, but actually CDB and other institutions, IDB and World Bank, are still engaged with Haiti. And we have a project working on mini grids that we hope to scale up. That's an important project, the geothermal project in the Eastern Caribbean is another important one. But we also want to emphasize how important it is that everyone in this room, all of the partners, that we work together on a set of common goals to raise the profile of this region in this area of electric mobility and transportation. And let's not forget, this is the big area that we're not talking about so much in this room, that the transportation of goods and the transportation of people also need to be included. It's not just driving our cars from here to there, but it's also how do we get our goods? How do we deal with maritime transportation that Anton mentioned? There are lots of opportunities. This is really an opportunity for all of us to work together. With that, I want to wish you all a very successful CSEF 8. And I want to join James in saying that we're at a moment of enough talk, more action, more urgent action, more accelerated action in terms of results. And let's just do this because we don't have a choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Turner-Jones, for helping to set the tone for these proceedings, a just transition, and time for action. CSEF 8 is the premier event of CARICOM Energy Month, a month-long celebration that aims to promote and support sustainable energy developments within the Caribbean community. The theme for CARICOM Energy Month is Accelerating Innovation, Driving Electrification. This theme highlights the importance of innovation in the energy sector and the rapidly growing market for electrification. It stresses the critical role of innovation in adapting current tools and technologies to keep pace with the constant changing landscape. I now invite you to direct your attention to the screen to view our CARICOM Energy Month video feature.
A region in terms of energy, one word, it's in transition.
CARICOM countries have historically been faced with energy price and supply volatility and energy insecurity, stemming from an over-reliance on imported petroleum and petroleum products, which provide almost 90% of our energy service needs. In their current state, fossil fuel imports account for 5 to 12% of GDP in the larger countries and 10 to 25% in the smaller islands of the Eastern Caribbean. But break the cycle we must.
Right now, we still import most of the energy that is used in the region. We've set ourselves targets for electricity generation. We're hoping to be at 27% renewable energy generation by 2027. That's not very far away. And so far, we're just at about 11% of our energy use that is coming from renewables. There's definitely a lot of room for us to be able to take advantage of our indigenous renewable energy sources. We see a lot of solar PV and wind, but we have great oceans that we have access to that also have the opportunity to provide us with energy. So there are lots of opportunities. There's a geothermal in our volcanic islands. So we do need to change the landscape so that we don't have to import so much, because it is costly to our governments to have to do that. But also we could have the potential to start exporting energy if it is that we can produce more than we actually need for the citizens of the Caribbean.
Commitment to this transition has birthed increased regional collaboration within the Caribbean community.
There is an of necessity, there has to be collaboration. Again, there's in various stages of implementation, but you find that countries are sharing, for example, technical assistance where necessary. But the other aspect of it is that we have to be conscious that for some of our countries, some of our member states, their geographic space and population is so small that in some cases, the smallest energy solution would be in excess, way in excess of whatever the capacity they would have And therefore, you have to look at cross-border solutions and collaboration through that experience.
Focus on driving innovation, revamping policies, and improving the knowledge and capacity of the region's people in the energy sector. These initiatives are vital for reducing energy costs and hitting national and regional sustainable energy targets. Despite these positive steps, challenges remain. The costly initial investment, limited funding, and outdated infrastructure are often hurdles.
A former Prime Minister of Jamaica once said it takes cash to care, and everybody, knows what that really means. Bottom line is, based on the targets that were established in 2013 for renewable electricity generation by CARICOM, for 47% of the electricity that we are producing to be from renewable sources, it's a big amount of money. And when I say big, I mean not as large as required for some other things, as we know, but we're talking about upwards of $12 billion across the countries in the region to meet that kind of target, 47% renewable electricity generation. 12 billion across the 15 member states of CARICOM is an exorbitant amount. This is like anything ranging from 5 to 12% of the GDPs of some of these countries when we run it on a country-by-country basis.
Challenging is funding the transition. And so that is one of the roles that the regional organizations definitely helps to support. So like the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, they are one of those who are driving, those financial initiatives. We do have programs that we work through the CARICOM Secretariat, just so that we can help our governments to meet these targets that they would have set. So yeah, it's been interesting because the commitment is there. And what we've found is that when we work together, that we're usually able to access more financing as well as to develop better programs, because a development partner may not necessarily want to fund a 10 megawatt solar farm. But if you put together 10 megawatt farms in different islands, then that now becomes more attractive. And so having regional organizations like the SICRI, like the CDB and the Secretariat and 5Cs pulling together projects that can benefit multiple countries is definitely one of the ways that we've been able to help to support the financial side of it.
The Caribbean's energy sector is at a critical junction. Transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources is essential for energy security, sustainability, cost savings, and combating the effects of climate change.
It's an expensive transition, but it might be more expensive if we don't actually make the changes that we need to make.
It's one that is complex. That's the best way of summarizing it. That it's one that is complex, and that complexity comes at with significant work, significant dedication, and requires significant upfront investments. But in the end, it's the kind of complexity which will deliver us a more resilient and a more secure energy future.
People expect me to say good luck, and that luck will attend to us. And I do believe that luck will attend, but not luck as you would have interpreted normally. I use luck as an acronym. Labor under certain knowledge. What that means, once we have the requisite data, once we have the requisite legislative fixes, once we have the requisite changes to financial strategy and policy that will afford, broadening and deepening the engagement of persons in the market and in the energy transition, the hope for the region is bright.
pleased to introduce the next speaker, the star of our video feature, Assistant Secretary General, Economic Integration, Innovation and Development at the CARICOM Secretariat, Mr. Joseph Cox. Mr. Cox is an applied economics consultant and advocate with a career spanning 30 years. His contribution to regional development is expansive, including such landmark works as recently authoring a book entitled The New Normal, a Post-COVID Premier for Business that received unanimous approval from the Council of Trade and Economic Development of the Made in CARICOM initiative. He also developed a project preparation facility through the SECRE. He implemented a regional strategic intervention framework, the program of technical assistance to CARICOM territories with short, medium, and long-term intervention strategies to optimize economic impact in CARICOM member states, along with a robust monitoring and evaluation system. Prior to his CARICOM posting, Mr. Cox was the managing partner for the Center for Growth and Development in Jamaica and doubled as the executive director, Growth Secretariat at the Planning Institute of Jamaica. He also provided oversight for the Inter-American Development Bank, Government of Jamaica Competitive Enhancement Program. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome an outstanding son of the Jamaica soil and outstanding regionalist, Mr. Joseph Cox.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I too, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I too will stand on the protocol already established as I wish you all a pleasant good evening. Now, you know, to be truthful, it is, I have to say, it is my distinct pleasure to add my words of welcome in this opening session of the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum for 2023 CSEF 8 under the theme Power in Transport. Now, the importance and timeliness of this forum needs really very little articulation as it contributes and represents yet another invaluable contribution to the CARICOM Energy Month as it provides another platform for knowledge exchange and shared learning from implementation experiences within CARICOM. Now, in contemplating the current dynamic within the regional energy space, the focus on power and transport is not a road paved with good intentions, but gives voice to an unvarnished truth. Indeed, the region is confronted with a paradox of development as it finds itself at yet another inflection point, where on the one hand, we are confronted by the prediction by the World Bank of oil prices hitting somewhere between, well, up to $150 per barrel by 2024, and therefore meaning even higher electricity rates if the Israeli-Hamas war morphs into a regional conflict. On the other hand, electrification and the adoption of renewable energy solutions within CARICOM is being hindered by supply chain challenges, archaic legislation, outdated power grids, and high interest rates. Indeed, we must remain mindful of the mounting concerns that some Caribbean countries may not be ready to transition to electric vehicles, insofar as in some jurisdictions, even 1% of total vehicle imports of EVs would or might bring significant strain to the electricity grid. However, as we transition on this new path, we must remain cognizant that the cost of electricity within the region has been persistently high over the past 2 decades. And even during periods of relatively low oil pricing, regional prices are on average around 4 times higher than what obtains in North America, with the obviously adverse impact on our regional competitiveness. Similarly, globally, mobility represents roughly between 20 and 25% of final energy consumption. The vast majority of CARICOM member states, however, exceed this global average, and in one instance, the transport sector records over 60% of total energy consumption, also far exceeding the consumption by the electricity sector. Therefore, diversifying energy portfolios with indigenous renewable energy reduces geopolitical security risks, import dependency, and the variability of electricity generation costs. Access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy services with a higher level of predictability in pricing and supply is therefore indispensable to the economic transformation in CARICOM countries. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, to effect the kind of transformation demanded by powering transport, the region requires the qualities of youth, not as a time of life, but as a state of mind. However, sadly, many persons within the region who find themselves sometimes at the apex of leadership of various sectors and institutions still have a reflexive attitude of rejection to new technology, new ideas, and sometimes new strategies, but in an ever-evolving global space. The net effect is sometimes a region seemingly marred by antiquated approaches and buffeted by perennial challenges. However, time waits on no one. The transition to electric vehicles is not just a trend, but a crucial step towards a more sustainable, clean, and prosperous future for our region. However, expectation that this transition would occur seamlessly along a simple adoption curve was always unrealistic. The higher capital cost of electric vehicles is often offset by a combination of lower life cycle costs and externality benefits. Capital cost premiums associated with electric vehicles are substantial, but they are declining. Nonetheless, the region is projected to move from roughly 19% electrification to 51% electrification by 2050. But history has thus far indicated that RE progress in the region has been organic and not accelerated. This therefore demands new approaches. Sales of electric cars are soaring in Europe and China, with the US further behind. But the rush of new launches is putting pressure on European manufacturers in particular, who are struggling to compete with cheap models coming out of China. In fact, according to the CFO of Mercedes-Benz, some manufacturers are pricing battery electric vehicles similarly to petrol variants despite higher costs of production amid intense price competition. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, economic dumping of vehicles has already crept into the EV market. Indeed, though EV sales in the US are still growing, the pace has slowed. In the first half of 2023, EV sales rose 49% from 1 year before, a slower rate than the 63% increase last year. Manufacturers who have adopted a strategy of hedging their bets on EVs by continuing to invest in hybrids, hydrogen-powered cars, and other alternative eco-friendly vehicles are also influencing market outcomes. In fact, much of the pressure on European car makers to switch to electric is coming from China, whose government has heavily subsidized the industry. Chinese manufacturers have never managed to export large numbers of petrol and diesel cars to Europe or the US, but now brands such as BYD, NIO, and the Chinese-owned MG are gaining market share relatively rapidly, to the alarm, of course, of the traditional car makers in Europe and the United States. The pressure, however, on the European industry has led to the EU recently launching an investigation into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies, a move that could eventually lead to tariffs on imports in an effort to protect the home industry. Nonetheless, EV sales are on pace to reach roughly 47 million in 2033, or 20% more than gasoline cars. This translates to a tenfold expansion in EV market over 12 years. This is of particular relevance as the EU is slated to ban the production of the internal combustion engine by 2035, with Nissan in Japan also following suit. Now, this move comes as policymakers worldwide tighten restrictions on vehicle emissions to promote a shift to EVs. In Europe, the new Euro 7 emission standards are on track to go into effect as early as July 2025, with some manufacturers determining that these rules will raise the cost of developing the ICE engines or the internal combustion engines to unsustainable levels. On our part, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, this will require a strategic shift in our development model to be even more inclusive. In fact, it is time that as a region, motor vehicles are recognized as tools of trade rather than merely for pleasure, and in so doing, reassess the applicable import duty framework. This would actively discourage the dumping, and I use dumping in a classic economic term, of internal combustion engine vehicles in our market when the transition to EVs become more pronounced and emission standards in Europe render the ICE vehicles uncompetitive in that market, but continue to be viable in the Caribbean. This requires urgent legislative intervention. Similarly, while we are cognizant that several CARICOM member states offer several incentives to encourage the procurement of hybrid and electric vehicles, including the removal or significant reductions in import duty, there is potential abuse of the process looming. Indeed, some EV manufacturers offer subscription-based upgrades to unlock additional features or capabilities of the vehicles, such as increased range, improved performance, or advanced driver assistance systems. It might seem counterintuitive, but automakers have been increasingly paywalling features and services for their vehicles, including some features that are physically built into the car already. These features are being charged for on a monthly basis. This, therefore, is likely to constitute significant revenue leakage to our already fiscally strapped member states, as the applicable motor vehicle import duties or revenue foregone, as the case may be, by the countries are founded on the CIF value of the vehicles. If features that would have normally enhanced the value of the vehicles are being implemented on a subscription basis, usually monthly, then the revenue foregone or collected, as the case may be, becomes compromised. For automakers, the advantage of this model is clear. Not only do they get a stream of recurring revenue for years after the initial purchase, but they can hope to maintain a longer-term relationship with the customer and build brand loyalty. Indeed, amid supply chain disruptions, geopolitical tensions, and the transition towards green mobility, manufacturers are, frankly speaking, trying to work out how to preserve their profit margins. It was all made possible by the advent of the over-the-air software updates, which were pioneered by Tesla around a decade ago and are now entering the mainstream. Today's vehicles are more internet connected and computerized than ever before. In fact, frankly speaking, I think we're driving mobile computers. But if companies can reach deep inside a vehicle to add new capabilities and tweak things from a distance. Brands such as Lexus, Toyota, and Subaru invite owners to pay for the convenience of being able to lock or start the cars remotely through an app. In some BMWs, you can pay to unlock the automatic high beam headlights, which dim for oncoming traffic. Indeed, in 2020, BMW floated the idea of pay-as-you-go heated seats and steering wheels. General Motors and Ford both offer subscription plans for their hands-free highway driving systems. In fact, Stellantis, which was formerly Fiat Chrysler, Ford, and GM, each aim to generate at least $20 billion in annual revenue from software services by 2030. In this regard, automakers argue that this approach can also allow them to streamline manufacturing by building cars to more uniform specifications, with the proviso being that down the line, owners can add on the features they want a la carte. All this points to is that there is a need for legislative reviews, grid modernization interventions, joint procurement practices, the advent of nearshoring to treat its supply chain disruptions, and frankly, where appropriate, the renegotiation of electricity distribution licenses. Now, specifically, the strategic interventions required should include matters of incentives and subsidies, obviously, charging infrastructure, the charging infrastructure development. All of this has to be underpinned, of course, by education and awareness campaigns. We have to look at fleet electrification programs, as well as the requisite supportive policies and regulations. Now, these recommendations are by no means exhaustive, and neither they're intended to be, but are merely indicative of what I hope would be the precursor to a clear-eyed and frank discourse over the next 2 days on the issues which confront us as we collectively interrogate the issues affecting the region's transition to electric vehicles. CARICOM's position is that renewable energy is key to the region's energy and economic security. In that vein, the Secretariat continues to engage its regional and international partners to address the risks associated with the sustainable energy transition and to promote and scale up private sector investments in renewable energy. It's within this context that the CARICOM Secretariat is pleased to be a strategic partner for this forum, along with the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the Caribbean Development Bank, and other partners. And indeed, tonight, as part of the CSEF 8, we are not only planning for the just transition to resilient and secure energy, we are also here to celebrate our current successes through the CARICOM Energy Achievement Award, which will be announced in a few minutes. But ladies and gentlemen, with ambition, innovation, and partnership, we can collectively reduce our carbon footprint by accelerating the deployment of renewable and low carbon sources of energy and the electrification of end-use sectors, particularly transport. Let us therefore seize this opportunity to take the region further along the pathway to power in transport. With that, I thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you won't get rid of me that quickly. So I will now invite Joseph Williams, coordinator of the Sustainable Energy Unit at the Caribbean Development Bank, and Dr. Devon Gardner. Oh, yes. Dr. Devon Gardner, who is head of technical programs at the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, who, along with myself, constituted the selection panel to, of course, join me on the stage for the announcement and presentation of the CARICOM Energy Achievement Award. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I think it is my duty, based on the guidance, indeed the instructions I got from these gentlemen, to be extraordinarily brief, to announce that the awardee for the 2023 CARICOM Energy Achievement Award will be Mr. Earlington. Wow, Earlington. Anyway, Mr. Earl Barrett. I don't know about Earlington. So I yield to Sherry Ann Ferguson, who will walk us through.
Mr. Earlington Earl Barrett is an engineer with over 40 years of experience and has been at the helm of the Wigton Wind Farm for more than 12 years. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering from the Milwaukee School of Engineering, Wisconsin, USA. He holds senior management training from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management, Northwestern University, and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Mr. Barrett is a lifetime member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, the IEEE, and a past chairman of the Electrical Engineering Practices Committee of the Bureau of Standards, Jamaica. Mr. Earl Barrett is the managing director of the Wigton Wind Farm, which is the largest wind energy facility in the English-speaking Caribbean, and was built by the government of Jamaica to help diversify Jamaica's energy mix in 2004 with the commissioning of a 20.7 megawatt plant, Wigton Phase 1.
Under the leadership of Mr. Barrett, this was followed by the development of Wigton Phase 2 in 2010, which generates 18 megawatts of power, and Wigton Phase 3, the further expansion of another 24 megawatts of the facility, was officially commissioned into service in June 2016. Mr. Barrett pioneered the democratization of the ownership of Wigton Wind Farm when Wigton was listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange in March 2019 through an initial public offering, an IPO, which allowed an estimated 31,000 Jamaicans to contribute to the nation's energy transition by owning shares in the company. Once listed on the JSE, Wigton became the second energy-related company on the market. Mr. Barrett continues to innovate and accelerate the development of the sustainable energy sector in the Caribbean through partnerships with electric mobility providers Flash Motors, the establishment of the Wigton Training Facility, which certifies practitioners in solar thermal, solar photovoltaic, bioenergy, and of course, wind energy. This stellar track record of the Wigton Wind Farm under Mr. Barrett's leadership has led to Wigton being chosen as the thematic hub for wind energy for the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Mr. Barrett is unavoidably absent this evening, and so I now invite Ms. Michelle Chinlen, Head of Energy at Wigton Wind Farm, to join me on stage to collect the Caribbean Energy Achievement Award on behalf of Mr. Barrett.
Thank you. That was a bit of a lukewarm clap. So I want you to join me again in giving our awardee, although he's not here, a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. The focus of CSEF 8, as you know, is power and transport. And we're really pleased with the response from the Jamaica private sector for this event. This evening's keynote address is a demonstration of the leading role the private sector is playing in driving electric mobility in the country. It therefore gives me great pleasure to invite Mr. Nigel Davey, the Managing Director of Innovative Energy Company Limited, to deliver the keynote address. Mr. Davey is an entrepreneur, an energy professional with over 30 years of experience in the energy sector. He currently serves as a Managing Director of Innovative Energy Company Limited, an engineering, energy, and construction company which he founded in the early 2000s with operations in Jamaica and the Caribbean. Prior to launching his own company, Mr. Davey developed, financed, constructed, and operated over 15 cogeneration and energy infrastructure projects in the United States, Central America, and Jamaica. A qualified aeronautic engineer and commercial pilot, Mr. Davey earned a Bachelor of Technology degree from the College of Aeronautics in New York and holds several certificates in electric power generation management, power systems harmonics, and power plant management. He is also the holder of several professional licenses from the Federal Aviation Administration and Federal Communication Commission. Mr. Davy also serves as chairman of Siboney Group Limited and as a director of innovative energy company Winton Wind Farm Limited, Flash Holdings Limited, and Flash Motors Company Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Mr. Nigel Davy, to the lectern.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to also stand on the platform that all protocols have been observed. But let me first extend a warm welcome to our visiting dignitaries and all attendees in general. I also want to recognize the organizers of the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum, particularly Mr. Devin Gardner and his team. Carbon neutrality and sustainable energy have become a global consensus and the pursuit of energy independence by major countries, including smaller states like ours within the region. And these will accelerate energy transformation. This forum is indeed timely, and we all hope that it will be a catalyst for the exponential growth in the development of sustainable energy in the region. We occasionally use the terms sustainable and renewable energy interchangeably to the chagrin of some of our learned colleagues. But for clarity, renewable energy is energy that is created and replenished naturally, while sustainable energy reliably meets both the short and long-term needs of society while maintaining the natural environment. My focus today will be centered around sustainable renewable energy. I should therefore get in no trouble with my learned colleagues. With the growth in sustainable renewable energy, regional states like Jamaica concurrently reduce our dependence on imported fossil fuel and enable us to better contain the inflationary effects of volatile fuel prices on our fragile economies. CARICOM has the potential to substantially wean itself from petroleum fuels as we know it. Still, our regional governments must be deliberate in setting lofty yet achievable RE penetration goals and follow up with enabling policies that ensure that these goals are achieved. Our petroleum in the region is the sun, wind, hydro, and geothermal, and we have an abundance of the former. Let's therefore responsibly exploit these natural and renewable energy resources to decarbonize and grow our economies. CARICOM can potentially be a major player in this sustainable renewable energy thrust. Renewable energy is no longer considered frontier technology. It is now deemed mainstream, and developing economies like ours should move with alacrity to deploy it at a rapid but sustainable pace. The local and regional private sectors should invest in renewable energy with equal vigor and conviction. I know Dr. Street Forrest at the Jamaica Stock Exchange is very bullish about the green bonds on the exchange. Undoubtedly, our regional governments share similar sentiments. This will be an excellent source of capital for the greening of our respective economies. Indeed, Jamaica and the regional governments, with the support of our international partners, have been setting lofty renewable energy penetration goals. Cases in point. Recently, Jamaica issued a request for proposal for 100 megawatts of renewable energy. Guyana did something similar a year or two ago. Barbados has somewhat liberalized its electricity sector. Nevis is now busy developing its geothermal resources. And we are all embarking on incentivizing the importation of electric vehicles and the deployment of EV charging stations. Further, in the private sector, Both of Jamaica's international airports have taken bold steps in installing significant capacities, making them substantially independent of the utility grid. Jamaica's National Irrigation Commission is embarking on the installation of 3.7 megawatts of renewable energy, plus battery energy storage for the agricultural sector. These initiatives demonstrate the conviction of our regional governments and the private sector in decarbonizing our respective economies. However, we have a lot more work to do. The following effect of these initiatives is an increase in foreign direct investments, which spawns economic activities while simultaneously making us more energy independent. I will hasten to add that our local and regional private sector should actively participate in these green investment initiatives. While FDIs are important, local participation is equally important. The continued downward pressure on the prices of PV solar panels, inverters, and battery energy storage systems has now made this technology very competitive with the traditional fossil-fired power plants. We just hope that wind and hydro technology will follow suit in this trend. Developers, investors, and grid operators, supported by policymakers, should work in harmony to ensure that the deployment of green energy is properly structured and preserve or improve the resilience of our electric grids. As such, it is imperative that integrated resource plans developed by the government, regulators, and the utilities be carefully developed with current data and be robust and dynamic. These IRPs should serve as a blueprint for the structured rollout of renewable energy. More often than not, the IRPs will show that RE-based distributed generation microgrids, coupled with battery energy storage technology, will be bulletproof models for resilient grids such as ours in the region. So what are some of the catalysts for the growth of sustainable energy penetration? I always say, and I'm going to preface the rest of my discussion with this, private capital always follows opportunities where it can generate a consistent, predictable, and reasonable return on investment. So to get into some of the catalysts for the growth, pricing of RE technology. We heard earlier that the price of greening our economy is so expensive that especially the small island states can't afford it. But today, the continuous downward pressure on prices for PV solar and battery energy storage makes this technology most affordable for the region. As technology is rapidly evolving, this trend could change. But let's not be paralyzed and delay making investment decisions today. We also need enabling government policies. We spoke about EVs earlier. The reduction in import duties on electric vehicles and motorcycles should be continuously pushed by the Jamaica Electric Vehicle Association and others. We also need specific legislation or amendment to the various lighting acts to facilitate the sale of electricity via EV charging stations. And I will just underscore the fact that EV charging station by the private sector is technically selling of electricity. And as we all know, here right here in Jamaica, JPSCO, the utility, is the only legal seller of electricity. So we must implore our government to amend the Lighting Act to facilitate the rapid rollout of EV charging stations. We also need to amend legislation to further liberalize the electric sector, not only on generation, but also on the transmission and distribution. I heard Mr. Joseph Cox underscore that point earlier. Also, specifically to allow for leasing of power generation assets, roof space, and sale of power by third parties. Barbados has a model that fosters this investment segment and Jamaica and other Caribbean states should take a close look at this model with a view to adopt it in some form or the other. Governments and other stakeholders should also look at other creative ways to make electric vehicles more affordable and attractive for our various citizens. Coupling between power and transport and power and industrial sectors. The usual question we ask, if we deploy a significant amount of renewable energy, what do we do with excess capacity? Of course, we can do power to gas. Power to gas is where we use electricity to produce green hydrogen for fuel. This may be used as fuel diversification in our motor vehicle sector, and also as an exportable commodity. Power to fertilizer. With an abundant, inexpensive renewable energy, we can electrolyze water to produce hydrogen and convert hydrogen to ammonia, and then ammonia to fertilizer. This too may be used in our local agricultural sector and as an exportable commodity. Power to water. Some of our CARICOM partners have challenges with adequate potable water, yet we are surrounded by the Caribbean Sea. Now, with inexpensive green energy, we will be enabled the deployment of desalination plants for affordable potable water throughout the region. Financing is also a challenge to really deploy green energy or sustainable green energy effectively. So access to competitively priced capital is usually one of the major obstacles. The regional governments and the private sector should seek grants and inexpensive capital from the Green Climate Fund, multilaterals, we have some here today, the green bonds, and similar institutions to unlock and deploy regional RE projects. Conversely, the Green Climate Fund and similar multilateral agencies should seek to make access to these funding sources less bureaucratic. So in closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me challenge our investment community, our utilities, regulators, and governments to work in harmony and move with alacrity in decarbonizing our regional economies. The long-term benefits to our people and our economies are too numerous to delay this thrust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davey, for your insightful remarks, for the work you're doing in Jamaica to drive electric mobility, and for your support to CSEF 8. Bringing the curtains down on the opening ceremony of CSEF 8 is the chairman of the executive board of the CCRI, Dr. James Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher is a former minister of government in St. Lucia, with responsibility for public service, sustainable development, energy, science, and technology. He's also the founder of the Caribbean Climate Justice Project. Dr. Fletcher was elected as chairman of the executive board of CCRI at the first meeting of the third cycle of the board on Tuesday, December 6, 2022. Dr. Fletcher is a key figure in the Caribbean's 1.5 to Stay Alive civil society campaign. During COP21 negotiations, he was chosen by the COP president to be part of the ministerial team that assisted in reaching consensus on the elements of the Paris Agreement. Please help me welcome the chairman of the CCRI, Dr. Fletcher, to deliver the closing remarks.
Distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good evening. Maybe 15 years ago in a previous life, the head of one of the UN organizations resident in Barbados, for Barbados in the Eastern Caribbean, said something to me that I took great offense to. He said, Jimmy, I've worked all around the Caribbean, all around the world, and Caribbean people amaze me. You are the absolute best at articulating a problem. Nobody articulates a problem like Caribbean people. I've been to meetings where you stand and you articulate problems perfectly. You take the audience through every facet, every element of the problem. The problem is 2 meetings later, 3 meetings later, 4 meetings later, 5 years later, you're still doing the same thing. And I took offense to it because it wasn't a good reflection on us. He made that statement to me in 2008. 15 years later, I've come to understand and appreciate the wisdom of that statement. And I think nowhere is it more apparent than in the energy sector. I attended my first energy meeting, again in that previous life as Director of Social and Sustainable Development at what is now the OECS Commission. I had responsibility for energy. And it was 170 kilometers from here in Bay, in Montego Bay. It was the first CREF. And we started articulating many of the problems that we're speaking about today. And yes, there has been some progress, but you heard there are still the issues of antiquated electricity legislation. My country, St. Lucia. Lucelec, the St. Lucia Electricity Company, has an 80-year monopoly on the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. Started in 1965, it ends in 2045. One of my last acts as Minister of Responsibility for Energy in 2016 was to decouple generation from that monopoly and also to create a National Utilities Regulatory Commission. But we still have monopolistic legislation in all of our countries. We still have in many of our countries the absence of an arm's length independent regulator that will give investors the certainty that they can come in and make the investments and that the incumbent utility will not have an advantage over them. These are still issues that are still there. We complain about absence of funding, and I see that particularly in the climate change space. But we cannot say to the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund or the GEF or the Caribbean Development Bank or the 5Cs that we have a plethora of projects in front of them for them to review, to approve. So we complain that we don't have the money, but we're not producing the bankable projects that we are submitting to them, because in every single sector in the Caribbean, climate change is impacting. Tourism, health, education, energy. So theoretically, for every single Caribbean island, there should be 15, 20 projects in front of the GCF, in front of the GEF, in front of the Adaptation Fund. Where are these projects? Yes, there's the issue of scale, but at least let's produce the projects. Where are the projects? So I really would not like this CSEF to be another one of those meetings. Again, in a previous life, I distinctly remember at the 54th Quoted on energy in Guyana in 2015, and the 55th Quoted on energy and the environment. My memory's still good, Joseph. Again in Guyana, Dr. Vince Henderson, who at the time was chairman of SIDSDOC, is now Minister of Responsibility for Energy, is Honorable Vince Henderson in Dominica, made an impassioned plea to us, the Ministers of Environment, Ministers of Energy, in the Caribbean, on why we needed a CCRE, why we needed a Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Some of us had doubts because we didn't see how CCRE fit into that energy ecosystem in the Caribbean. You already had an energy desk in CARICOM, you had CDB doing work in energy, and we were not convinced that there was a need for CCRE. Vince convinced us that there was a need for CCRE. There is a need for CCRE, but I think, and I'm speaking now as the chairman of CCRE, we need to reconceptualize what is that space that CCRE should be occupying in that regional energy ecosystem. And I'm hoping it's one of the things that comes out of this meeting, because as the chairman of CCRE, I need to be able to, we have a board meeting coincidentally on Friday here in this hotel. We need to start looking at how CCRE fills that void and acts as a catalyst for this energy transition in the region. And we would like this to come out of this. One of the items on the agenda I see is dealing with excess renewable energy. Excess renewable energy? Where is the renewable energy? How can we talk about excess renewable energy when we're not even anywhere near the 47 or 45% that we've set as our target? So, you know, we have to be realistic. This Caribbean needs energy champions. And we do not have energy champions in the Caribbean. We need, and I'm looking at some of the ministers in the room, we need you to be energy champions. We need you to take this energy sector and in your own domestic jurisdictions, ensure that the legislation that will remove these monopolistic, antiquated electricity supply acts is repealed and that we have modern energy legislation, a suite of legislation, that we have independent arm's length regulators in all of these countries that would give independent power producers the certainty, the confidence that they can move into that space and they will be operating on a level playing field with the incumbent utilities. We need also innovation, and we need our universities to come in. I'm very happy that both the University of the West Indies and the University of Belize is here, because I remember Al Binger of SIDS-DOC, who has done so much work in this region, exciting me as a minister about OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. My staff started getting tired of hearing me talking about OTEC. But I saw in OTEC an opportunity for small island developing states to deal with this vexing problem of baseload power, particularly those that don't have geothermal. And OTEC had so many other side effects that could come. We still know further with OTEC, and I think there we need academia to come in and with the private sector to see how we can develop OTEC that can work for us. But the transport sector, that's what we're here to discuss. It's not just the vehicles, but how about coal ironing of our ports? How about saying to our ports, our port authorities, that we will green our ports, and we will say to these big mega cruise ships that come in, and every time one of these cruise ships berths in one of our ports, it uses between 5 and 7 megawatts of electricity. Imagine St. Lucia, 4 cruise ships, which we see routinely during the cruise ship season, berthed at Point Seraphin and Port Carenage. That's 20 megawatts of electricity. That changes the business case of the utility company tremendously. So we're exporting energy now. You don't have to be converting it to green hydrogen or green ammonia. You're selling it to Norwegian and to Royal Caribbean and to Celebrity and Carnival. That's energy that is being exported. So these are opportunities that we have to take advantage of. But finally, having founded the Caribbean Climate Justice Project, it would be remiss of me if I don't speak about this issue of just transition. We have to ensure that everybody is a participant in this energy transition. Because right now, the poor person in the Caribbean couldn't care less about this energy transition because they cannot afford to put solar PV panels on their rooftop. First of all, their rooftop cannot accommodate solar PV panels. The wiring at their homes cannot accommodate solar. I'm just going through the process myself of putting up solar PV panels, and I have to do a complete retrofit of my wiring because I have to bring it up to code, and it costs money. Not to mention the fact that the average PV system costs, what, 10, 15,000 US dollars? They can't afford that. So how do we get them excited? Because they're the ones who their electricity bill is a bigger percentage of their disposable income than it is for me. While I would love to reduce the amount I'm paying to LuSelect, for the poor person who's paying maybe $35, $40 a month, that might be 40% of their disposable income. We need to see a way in which we can reduce it, and maybe microgrids in some of these communities, maybe populating all the public buildings adjacent to these impoverished communities with solar PV panels and using that to offset their charges. Maybe these are some of the things we can do, but we have to get them excited about this energy transition. Otherwise, you'll find that it's a very small subset of our population that is interested in this. And the issue of vehicles, let's not forget, this explosion in vehicles on our roads happened when people were able to go on the internet and buy their own vehicle and bypass the car vehicle dealers. That is the only time electric vehicles will take off in this region. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how much government reduces import duties on vehicles, they will still be outside of the range of the average person who is driving a vehicle on those roads. So we have to see if this happens, how do we prepare for it? And we don't have the same problems that we had when we had this abundance of ICE vehicles on our roads to now have an abundance of computers with outdated operating systems running on our roads and the perils that that can cause. But let's prepare for that because some of these vehicles that are being used in Europe will eventually find themselves in our market here. How do we prepare for that? So ladies and gentlemen, my charge to you today, I'm sorry this is not your typical closing remarks, but I really couldn't come here and just say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It wouldn't make sense. I want to thank everybody who's spoken before because you've articulated the problem really well. What I do not want to happen is that that's all we do today. So please, let us commit to making CSEF 8 the conference where we finally decide to take action. We identify the champions and the champions take this because really, if we don't use this opportunity with what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what can happen with Hamas, Israel, and what that can do to energy prices. If we don't seize this opportunity, I don't know what opportunity we will. So thank you to all our development partners. Thank you to everyone who has spoken. Thank you to everyone who's been here, and I hope you have a very productive CSEF 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. I have a feeling I should be saying after that thought-provoking session you just had, somebody should say amen, right? Amen? Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the opening ceremony for CSEF 8. On behalf of the organizers and partner institutions, I would like to thank all of our speakers and you for making this event a resounding success. I now invite you to join us for some cocktails. Thank you very much and good evening.